Good morning. Welcome to Raaonline. Today's session is going to be on uterus and its supports. We are going to have it in 3 smaller sessions, with each smaller session ending with a summary of whatever we have taken in that part of the session, followed by a few questions for you to just revisit and rethink. So as a whole, it will be a 3-part session, which you can see it at your leisure. Uterus, we know it's an organ of the female reproductive system and responsible for the menstruation and for development of the fetus during its development within the mother's womb. And this womb is called the uterus. And its supports are very, very important because this is one organ which is often, of course, nowadays we don't see that much thanks. But then it is often seen in a condition where it is not in its position. There are other organs also similarly there, which we will talk, but then they are not predisposed to descend from their position as compared to the uterus. So today we will speak on the uterus and its supports. So in the CBME curriculum, it comes under the anatomy 48.2, where we need to describe the position, the features, the important peritoneal and other relations, its blood supply, the nerve supply, lymphatic drainage and the clinical aspects. The supports are also there, which we will be discussing. So uterus is a thick walled, you can see the walls. This is the muscular wall and a very thin cavity which is seen on a sagittal section. So it's a thick walled muscular organ, pear-shaped and situated in the lesser pelvis. So this is the area of lesser pelvis. So this is the sacrum. This is the sacral promontory and this is the sacrum, and anteriorly this is the pubic symphysis depicted here in the blue. So this space is called the pelvic cavity, and within the pelvic cavity it is situated in the lesser pelvis, a pear-shaped organ. Above it communicates with the uterine tube. You can see that in the superior lateral angle aspect it is communicating with the uterine tube, and this is the ovary, and below it communicates with the vagina. This is the vaginal opening into the exterior, and here is the labia. And this is the bladder and this is the rectum, which are the 2 other viscera which are present within the lesser pelvic cavity. Now this position of the uterus is quite unique. You see that it is folded and rests on the superior surface of the urinary bladder. In subsequent slides we will be seeing why is it so, what is it called. It's quite unique. Okay, so that we will be seeing, but just bear it in mind. This position is important. Imagine this position being straight, just like the rectum. If the uterus is straight, it will be angulated, it will not be angulated rather. It will be positioned directly to the opening of the vagina if it is like this. So if the uterus, instead of being like this, if it is like this here, if this is the uterus and it is in line with the vagina, then any predisposing factor which is going to push or something is not to hold will cause the uterus to come out. So this is a nature's mechanism of having the uterus in this position, and that specifically has a name which we will call it, we will see in the subsequent slide. And also I want to make a note that this position of the uterus depends on whether it is associated feature. If this bladder is full, say this is getting filled up and it is increasing in size. So instead of this, it is increasing here in size. So if the bladder is, instead of being empty and becomes full and gets distended, so the uterus which is lying on its superior surface also will be lifted up. So it will be lifted up and it will be in a different position. So the position of the uterus also depends on the filling up of the bladder. The same goes for the rectum and the sigmoid colon, because if they get filled up, and that again will have a bearing on the position. And not only this, we all know the main function of the uterus is to ensure that the baby, the fetus grows within it. So as the fetus increases in size, obviously the uterus also will increase in size, and then the position will differ. Instead of situated in the lesser pelvis, the uterus will be moving up, occupying the abdominal cavity. So the position of the uterus normally is in the lesser pelvis, between the bladder anteriorly and the rectum posteriorly, and it is bent over the superior surface of the bladder. Whereas in conditions both physiological and sometimes diseased, the position may change. Diseased, we are not worried. Physiological also, it may be changed. That has to be kept in mind. What are the parts of the uterus? So this is a coronal section of the uterus that we are seeing. This part is the fundus. So this is the fundus of the uterus. As you can see, this part of the uterus is above the opening of the uterine tube. So the definition of fundus of the uterus is that part of the uterus which is above the opening of the uterine tube. The uterine tubes open in the superolateral angles. The part below the uterine tube is called the body. So from here to here is the body. So the body extends from the fundus to the constricted portion. So the constricted portion is called the internal os. Internal os. Because its os is opening, it's in the inner aspect, so it's called internal os. So the extension between the fundus and the internal os is the body of the uterus. The cervix is between the internal os and the external os. So this is the opening to the exterior, not exactly to the exterior atmosphere, into the vagina. Vagina in turn is communicating to the exterior. So this is opening is more towards the external aspect, so it's called the external os, and this is the internal. So the part of the uterus between the internal and the external os, the internal os represents the constricted portion beyond the body, is the cervix. And the cervix is divided into vaginal and supravaginal. You can see that the vagina extends beyond the cervix. So there is a small portion of the cervix which is into the vagina. So that's called as the vaginal part. And this part of the cervix which is above the vagina is the supravaginal part. And actually there is a small recess. Recess means some pouching because of the projection of the cervix into the vagina. And that recesses, we will talk about it when we go to the cervix.